What can you tell us about the requests for information that have gone out for the committee? I know that today was the deadline to receive a lot of information, both from government agencies and from private companies, records related to that attack.
Well, I talked to the staff a few hours ago, and quite a bit of information has come in and is still coming in. The deadline extends to, I think, midnight tonight. So I can't really tell you what has come in, except that there is a great amount of material, and we will be learning more tomorrow about what's in it. And the staff may have an announcement later this evening. I don't know for sure, but it's very clear that agencies responded.
The House Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, had a striking response to the request to telecom companies in particular, asking them to retain records, including some records related to members of Congress who had participated in the rally that immediately preceded the attack on the Capitol. He basically threatened the companies, saying if they complied with these requests for information, they would, quote, lose their ability to operate in the United States. And when Republicans were in the majority, they would not forget any companies that complied with this request for information. I have to ask what you make of that. I think anybody else telling companies not to respond to a congressional inquiry would be considered attempting to tamper with that investigation. I don't know if that sort of designation applies to the Republican leader here, but I just wanted to get your reaction to that.
Well, I was astonished, frankly, by his statements. Number one, there's no basis in law for it. And number two, as you point out, it is a felony to obstruct a congressional investigation, 1505 of the 18 USC. Now, whether he has a defense or not, that I don't know. Sometimes there is a speech or debate clause, but it doesn't protect against criminal activity. But the real point is, what's he hiding? Why is he trying to keep the truth from coming out? I think the leaders of our country, and Kevin is one of them, should be stepping forward and trying to get to the bottom of everything that led up to January 6th. And people who aren't doing that are a mystery to me, unless they participated. I don't know. I can't imagine what his reason for that is, that there is a benign reason for these statements.
California Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, chair of the House Administration Committee, member of the January 6th Select Committee. Congresswoman Lofgren, it's nice to have you here with us tonight. Thanks for taking the time to help us understand.
Thanks, Rachel.
June 1966, the New York Times was still estimating that 2,000 whites-only hospitals in the American South wouldn't be in compliance with the civil rights law, and so they wouldn't be certified to participate in the Medicare program. But by the month after that, by July, when Medicare went into effect, those hospitals had dug deep and found it within themselves to start complying with the Civil Rights Act after all. Around the 50th anniversary of Medicare in 2015, there was some renewed attention to that quiet but definitive way President Johnson and his health secretary, John Gardner, had desegregated American hospitals basically overnight. There were headlines like this one in the Washington Post, the massive role Medicare played in racial integration, and this one in U.S. News, desegregation, the hidden legacy of Medicare. I only point out that news coverage from 2015 just to say that you didn't have to be there yourself in 1964, 1965, 1966 to see this happen firsthand. This isn't like a secret history that nobody knows about. This is what we did as a country in our modern history. But you'd never know it from the born yesterday commentary in response to President Biden's actions today. Today, President Biden announced a muscular new approach by the federal government to contend with the Delta variant of the coronavirus, to try to finally wrench this pandemic to the ground and defeat it. The immediate chorus from Republican governors and Republican members of Congress and right-wing commentators all across the country was, he can't do that. He can't tell private entities what to do. Really? Why does your car have a seatbelt? Maybe the company that made your car, that private entity, didn't want to put in seatbelts. But nevertheless, your car has a seatbelt. Why is that? Why is the ground beef you bought for dinner tonight government inspected? You know, meat producers do, in the private sector, have every incentive to only produce meat that people like and that doesn't make anybody sick, right? We don't need the government sticking its nose in and telling you whether or not that's actually cow you're eating and not like roadkill. Why is there government inspection of that privately produced product? This is a link and pin coupling system. This used to be the industry standard for how you linked railway cars together. And for whatever reason, this is what railroad companies liked. This is what they built for their cars. Even though brakemen not infrequently got their fingers or even their hands ripped off while they were trying to operate this stupid system for tying rail cars together, the companies liked it. This is what they used. It's what they'd been using for decades. Why would they change? It would be expensive to have to do it any other way. Until 1893, when the federal government banned those types of couplings and forced railroad companies to use something that wouldn't rip the hands off their employees. That was 1893, the Safety Appliance Act. Today, President Biden announced that the Occupational Safety and Health Association, OSHA, part of the Labor Department, will issue new rules for all employers in the United States that have 100 or more employees. The rule will say that employees have to either be vaccinated against COVID-19, or if they're not, they have to face mandatory COVID testing every week on the job. And when President Biden announced that today, it was a plain chant, one-note chorus from Republican politicians coast to coast. President Biden can't do that. Only a dictator could tell companies to do something like that. Behold, President Richard Nixon, in December 1970, signing into law the creation of the agency that was built and established in this country to do exactly that, to do exactly what President Biden is employing it to do as of tonight.
We see a bill that represents in its culmination the American system at its best. Democrats, Republicans, the House, the Senate, the White House, business, labor, all cooperating in a common goal, the saving of lives, the avoiding of injuries, making the places of work for 55 million Americans safer and more pleasant places. This is certainly a great goal.
President Biden today is, in fact, putting the muscle of the federal government and his authority as president behind trying to make our national offense against COVID more intense, more thorough, more rational, less porous, less helter-skelter and regionally divided. Yes, he is using the huge leverage of Medicare and Medicaid funding to tell health providers that if you get Medicare and Medicaid funding at your hospital, your health facility, your staff must be vaccinated. And the chorus on the right was instant. Oh, that's controversial. Even the commentary in the press on this, that's a very controversial thing to do. Some staff won't want to be vaccinated. Yes, that's true. You think that's less controversial or less of a reach than LBJ using Medicare to forcibly desegregate 2,000 whites-only hospitals in the South overnight? You think this is some sort of unprecedented thing President Biden is doing? That hospitals and health facilities order that staff have to be vaccinated, that builds on what he already ordered several months ago in terms of nursing home staff. Nursing homes that get federal funding, and they basically all do. A condition of that federal funding is that nursing home staff all need to be vaccinated. This is an extension of that to apply to hospitals and health facilities. President Biden is also using his authority over the federal workforce to require vaccinations among federal workers and among federal contractors. But he can't tell federal contractors how to do business. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. The same way he's requiring federal contractors to pay a $15 an hour minimum wage. This is not some new dictatorial power he's assuming. This is how the government works. Wake up. And yes, he is using OSHA to require large private employers to vaccinate employees or test them. Educational institutions that he has direct authority over, like schools operated by the Defense Department, Head Start programs, early Head Start programs. He's using his authority over those programs to ensure that teachers and staff at those programs will have to be vaccinated too. That said, for the vast majority of schools, the president doesn't have the authority to directly order something like that. In those cases, he's recognizing the limits of his authorities, and he's instead calling on states to put similar rules in place. Get school staff vaccinated to protect kids. He's calling on states to put those rules in place everywhere, even as he's calling out the red state governors and other elected officials who are trying to build their political futures on blocking the COVID response at all costs.
Despite America having unprecedented and successful vaccination program, despite the fact that for almost 5 months, free vaccines have been available in 80,000 different locations, we still have nearly 80 million Americans who have failed to get the shot. And to make matters worse, there are elected officials actively working to undermine the fight against COVID-19. Instead of encouraging people to get vaccinated and mask up, they're ordering mobile morgues for the unvaccinated dying from COVID in their communities. This is totally unacceptable. The vast majority of Americans are doing the right thing. Nearly 3/4 of the eligible have gotten at least one shot, but 1/4 has not gotten any. That's nearly 80 million Americans not vaccinated. And a country as large as ours, that's 25% minority. That 25% can cause a lot of damage, and they are. The unvaccinated overcrowd our hospitals, are overrunning emergency rooms and intensive care units, leaving no room for someone with a heart attack or pancreatitis or cancer. My message to unvaccinated Americans is this: what more is there to wait for? What more do you need to see? We've made vaccinations free, safe, and convenient. The vaccine has FDA approval. Over 200 million Americans have gotten at least one shot. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. So please do the right thing.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin. Your refusal has cost all of us. Elsewhere in his remarks today, the president said, what makes this incredibly frustrating is we have the tools to combat COVID-19, but a distinct minority of Americans, supported by a distinct minority of officials, are keeping us from turning the corner. These pandemic politics are making people sick, causing unvaccinated people to die. We can't allow these actions to stand in the way of protecting the large majority of Americans who have done their part and who want to get back to life as normal. President Biden today basically hitting the reset button, a new no-holds-barred approach to get our country to the vaccination rates we need to stop overfilling our hospitals, to stop 1,500 Americans dying each and every day, to get transmission down to the point where we can someday see the end of this thing, and we can stop deploying active-duty military teams to rural hospitals around the country to bolster their staff that is falling by the wayside in exhaustion and despair. And the reaction on the right today and tonight and in much of the Beltway press is, oh, presidents can't do stuff like this. That is a born yesterday canard, an ahistorical, deliberate, head-in-the-sand canard about which President Johnson, President Nixon, President Roosevelt, who was it who signed the railroad Lincoln pin coupling ban? I think that was President Benjamin Harrison. I mean, any and all of those presidents would like to have a word with everybody screaming today that President Biden doesn't really lead a federal government with these kinds of authorities. These are absolutely the authorities of the federal government. His choice here is that he's going to use them to try to save lives and get us past this pandemic that is otherwise just not quitting. The more substantive question here is not about, whether this represents us becoming communists, like Reagan said about Medicare, right? People are going to talk about this, however they're going to talk about this, to whatever political advantage they want to try to turn it to. The real substantive question is, how is this all going to work? And is this, in fact, a path to end the pandemic?
On this Michigan speedway, with cars racing up to 200 miles per hour, Brianna Daniels has eyes for just one of them. Her mind is clear. Her only focus, swapping out this race car's rear tires. And while Brianna is one of the best in the business, with enough skills to replace two 70-pound tires in roughly 15 seconds, this hasn't always been the dream.
What would an 18, 17-year-old college student, Brianna Daniels, think of you right now?
Girl, you are crazy, especially a little black girl like myself at that time, definitely was like, I'm never getting into NASCAR. It wasn't even a thought in my mind.
Now, not only is Brianna in NASCAR, she's making history, becoming the organization's first black female pit crew member in 2017.
I just want people to know that women can do what the men do. I just wish that we could be treated equally, and I'm working to change that.
NASCAR has always contended with a lack of gender and racial diversity within its ranks. It wasn't until 2012, 64 years after NASCAR began, that it signed on its first female pit crew member, Christmas Abbott. Since then, only 15 pit crew members have been women. Just 3 have been women of color. Even NASCAR's fan base is overwhelmingly white, with black fans making up only 9% of the demographic.
NASCAR hasn't had very much success with the African-American community at large is because of NASCAR's association with the Confederate flag. You see that symbol and you know that it evokes these feelings of hatred and racial denigration.
But in the last year, amid this country's racial reckoning, even NASCAR is looking to evolve, banning the Confederate flag, adding stars like Michael Jordan and rapper Pitbull to its team owner roster, and paving the way for the sport to look a little more like the country it represents.
Diversity in NASCAR has been a big initiative for the sport for a long time, and obviously it's taken a while to get to where we are today, and we still have a lot of room to go.
I just feel like everything I've been through in life brought me to this very moment.
In April 2016, Brianna, then a D1 basketball star at Norfolk State University, received a life-changing opportunity to audition for a coveted spot on a NASCAR pit crew team.
Those guys put us to the test. Even though we didn't have that much time to learn everything, they wanted to see who can take that little information in, and who can make the best of it.
It was a grueling process, made even more difficult by the obvious stigma that came with being a woman trying out for a role typically held by men.
One of the guys who was also trying out to be a tire carrier, he came up to me and told me, he was like, Bree, he said, they say none of the women ever make it in NASCAR. It really made me upset. I was like, I don't care what they say. I'm gonna work as hard as I can to prove what they said wrong.
For Brianna, there's no fuel like low expectations. After her tryout, she made the team.
What are similarities, you'd say, between playing basketball and doing this?
You have to have that quick hand speed, the quick finesse, and the same thing, transition over to being a tire changer. You have to be low, to the car, quick, poised, calm.
Do you think you're inspiring the next generation?
Oh, definitely. I get pictures from parents, with their sons, their daughters, no matter what race, and they